Hey everyone, it's Ryan with Spiceworks. Thanks so much for hanging out with us at another Spiceworks Partner Webinar, 99 Problems But Virtual Application Protection Isn't One, brought to you by Zerto. A few things I hope everybody checks out. The first thing is the question box on your screen. It's to the left. Please don't be shy. I can't encourage you enough to ask questions. We really, really would love to see them. It's so easy. Just put them in and click submit. This is a great chance to get some insight from real pros, so don't be shy. Another thing to remember is that we are recording the webinar, so if you have to step out for any reason, it's no huge cause for concern. You're going to get a link to that recording via email today, and that's an on-demand presentation, so you can check it out as many times as you'd like and share it with your colleagues. Another thing to remember is that we are giving away a $150 Amazon.com gift card for one attendee. You'll have to be on the line at the end to be eligible, so hang around with us. And I'd like to introduce our presenters. We have Shannon Snowden, Senior Technical Marketing Architect for Zerto, and you'll notice there's also a speaker bio in your presentation. It's to the right. All you have to do is click the arrow, and there'll be a drop-down with that bio, so definitely check that out. It'll give you a nice background about Shannon, and we're really excited to announce that we have a Zerto customer on the line. We have Gregory Ireland, Network Manager for Northwest Community Credit Union, and he's going to share a success story using Zerto, so we should have a great presentation here. Shannon's going to get us started. Whenever you're ready, Shannon.
Thanks, Ryan. So first thing we always like to call out are all the awards at the top of this slide, and we're very proud of those. So starting back in 2011 with the Best of VMworld and all the way up through the current Gartner Cool Vendor, those are very important that indicate that Zerto's doing something different, and we really are. The way we approach things and the way that we are embraced by our customers, to the point that we love having these type webinars with our customers on with us and let them tell you their story. So as Ryan's already done a brief speaker introduction, and then we're going to get right into the Northwest Community Credit Union story, and Greg's going to share that with us, and then I'm going to come back and talk about how things are put together in case you're not familiar with Zerto, and we expect to have a good time on today's webinar. So there's our mugshots. If you haven't looked over at the bios, we both look extremely happy to be getting a mugshot, as most introverted networking and IT people are. So there we are. And Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you now to get started on your story with Northwest Community Credit Union.
Well, thanks, Shannon. Again, my name is Gregory Ireland, Network Manager for Northwest Community Credit Union. We are located in Oregon. We're statewide in our branch locations, 18 branches. We've been around since 1949. Let's see. Roughly 250 employees. We've got an infrastructure of about 128 servers, primarily the majority of them virtualized, 70%. Using compellent SANs for our in our primary data center as well as DR data center, ranging from file services, Microsoft SQL, and then a bunch of purpose-built VMs that were related to our financial platform. We do have a DR facility that's located in our Portland office. Our primary site is in Eugene, Oregon. And we do replicate via SAN as well as primarily Zerto for the VMs. Let's see. As many of you probably have found, I saw that some are banking industry, so the 24-hour banking, keeping your systems up and going, is a big challenge for us. Everybody's demanding that keeping uptime. So for those that are familiar, home banking and those type of services. Meeting recovery point objectives was a challenge for us. We used initially we didn't have anything going. We were starting to play with Site Recovery Manager via the VMware tools. And one of the challenges that we were starting to see with that is that for us it was a all or nothing deal when it came to the LUN replication using Site Recovery Manager. Great product when we were initially testing it, but we found that we needed more to that. And then that's where we started looking into additional products. We came across Zerto at a VMUG conference actually a couple years ago, and we started talking with them to see how they could better support what our objectives were. And one of the nice things that we found out from them is that they do checkpoints, recovery checkpoints, so we can actually go back to a point in time on our replications. So if something happened within the last 5-10 minutes, whatever, we were able to actually go back to a good state prior to the event and bring those systems back online pretty easily. Let's see. And Shannon, tell me if I'm going too fast on this, but when we initially started, again, I mentioned Site Recovery Manager. We were definitely looking into that. It was a great opportunity for us to start using the product, but it wasn't granular enough. If LUN-based replication, if I have a bunch of systems sitting on that LUN, like I mentioned before, for us it was an all-or-nothing deal unless we built our LUNs specifically to house specific servers or a grouping of servers to be sitting on that LUN to be replicated. And then at the time that we needed to do a failover, all those systems would be replicated to our DR site and brought online with that. We did do some testing with vSphere replication. Again, it was a great opportunity to see a different side of the process, very similar to Zerto, where it's, I can pick and choose my systems. But the only drawback to the vSphere replication that we found, again, there's the historical point in time didn't exist. So whatever was replicated, garbage in, garbage out, that information got sent over. And so we didn't, unless there was some reason that the system didn't replicate that correctly, I got the same information on both sides regardless with the vSphere replication. But when we started playing with Zerto, what we found was it was fairly easy to get set up, simple to install. Getting all the information initially started was very simple, couple clicks. You had the virtual protection groups, VPG groups created, very easy to add systems, build them real easily. What you have your partners and everything set up is fairly straightforward. We were able to do it pretty much within a couple hours of installation. The nice thing is that to do failover testing is very straightforward. It's a simple click of a button. You can either do a failover test or you can do a failover live. All from pushing just a couple buttons. Very little work that you have to really do once everything is created and set up. For our purposes, we've done several failover testing, done a couple live tests just for our sanity to make sure that everything was working correctly, and have yet to find any issue with the process. It's able to take control. We actually are in the process of training a bunch of new guys on how to use the product, and it's so simple to use that we've got a brand new guy that's only been with us for 3 weeks, and he's creating VPG groups right out of the box with very little hands-on other than just showing them, here's how you do it, right-click, add the machine, set the targets, pretty easily to start moving forward. Why Zerto? I mean, for us, it comes down to simplicity and easy to manage. From our perspective, as many of you probably see my bio, there's a lot of things that I report on. We're a very small IT shop, 11 people on staff, and we handle pretty much everything that comes through. And for us, trying to make our lives easier is number one goal for us. And Zerto definitely allowed us to do that. Like I said, we brought on a new person. It's easy to train to, and then get everybody up and running to be able to maintain these groups. With the continuous data protection and the journaling, like I said, we can get point in time that I couldn't get with Site Recovery Manager or vSphere replication. So that's always an added benefit. So we have, in our process, we were actually talking about it yesterday, was that we were looking at doing some things with a server and putting a patch on it, and our options were to, you go back to your backup or whatnot. But in this case, since we do have it in a VPG group, the process would be that we can patch it, and if anything went awry with that server, we could actually then roll over to our DR center with the journaling, the point-in-time checkpoint, and actually recover that server to the previous state just before that, and then prepare to go do our rollback process. But that's something that we haven't had in the past. Normally you rely on backups. That could take a little while to recover those. But in this case, with the journaling functionality that Zerto provides for us, not having to worry about that, and since we can go back to whatever levels we set it to for managing the RPOs, we're getting the performance that we expect out of it. I guess I kind of blew through that, but Shannon, I guess it's back to you.
Oh, that was good stuff. It always feels like it's going faster than it is. So, I wanted to just ping a couple things off of you. So, in your presentation, you were talking about things that are really you don't associate with disaster recovery products, processes, or anything normally. You brought up the term simple and easy to use. So that to me is a pretty impressive thing just off the bat of having a disaster recovery product that can get you within seconds between data centers and reliable recovery times. And the administrator, the guy with a whole list of things on your plate, including DR, and you label this as one of the more simpler things that you get to do.
Correct. We're doing multiple things. We're in the process of building a new support center, so I'm really tied up in that project. One of the things that we are planning on doing with Zerto, we're actually going to use Zerto as a pivot utility for us to move between our current data center and moving to a data center across town for us. And we're actually going to utilize Zerto to move all of our critical member-facing services to keep our uptime going. We are going to use Zerto, move us to our DR center once we're there, and then move all of our data center over to the new site. And once we're located there, we'll use Zerto to actually move it back. So not necessarily because it's a disaster that we're using it, but we're using it as a way to help us migrate our data around between locations.
Sure, and that's definitely a popular use case for Zerto virtual replication as well as our data center moves, because you can orchestrate the whole thing and you can have it already replicated there, and when you flip the switch, you're essentially just doing delta syncs. So this definitely brings a lot of more capability for. Usually what happens in a lot of these products is they become point products of only solving one problem, and it's really nice to get something that can solve multiple. We have one question in that I think is a good time to ask it, since we're talking about your site specifically, is how much data are you replicating and how big is your connection between your two sites in was it Eugene and Portland? Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So the data that we're replicating, we're roughly about 6 terabytes of data that we're replicating. It's the servers themselves are a hodgepodge of database sizes, but total data that we're looking at replicating is about 6 terabytes. We're doing them in groups, grouping them so that we're not crushing our pipe, but I actually have 2 methods of replicating. Today we actually we have an MPLS cloud network infrastructure, 50 megabit to my data center, but then our primary replication link is actually a 100 megabit Ethernet point-to-point that we've installed about a year ago. And that mainly is to get majority of the data traffic off of the primary network, but we can replicate either way. And mainly is to clean the data traffic up, isolate the data traffic from being with the mainstream data flow for the rest of the organization. But even at that, once everything's been replicated, we don't see that big of an impact. We actually monitor the replication. It's when you do your initial push, that's your big data push. So if you got a 100 gig server or a terabyte server, I mean, it's going to take some time to get the data across there, no matter how you look at it. But once it's done, we're seeing very little impact to the network, maybe 1 or 2% on the network at all for data traffic, and that's just the delta changes. So we're not really seeing a huge impact, but our primary goal for our connection that we put in was that it's also a way for if we have any other issues with any of our other services, that's also a data path to our data center for the entire organization is through that link.
Mm. Now, did you use the native compression that you can use for the VPGs? Do you have like a compression piece of hardware, or how do you do that?
Nope, we're using built-in Zerto technology. We don't have any. I don't have any WAN accelerators. I don't have any additional hardware compression. We're using everything right out of the box that Zerto provides.
Normally what we see in production, and maybe you can validate this or skew it one way or the other, but we see anywhere from like 20 to 80%, but normally we see 50%. But it all depends on of course, the I/O profile and everything. But we see around a 50% bandwidth savings normally. Is that your case as well, or what do you see?
We're seeing at least that. I mean, I'd have to pull it up and give you a better idea of what we're doing, but we're not seeing, again, for what we're seeing, we're not seeing a huge impact to the network. I mean, we send a lot of data over that private line, and we don't really see an issue with the Zerto impacting any of that. It does what it has to do. It does what it does, and it does it very well from what we've seen.
Yeah, because really by the time you get the data there, then we're just dealing with the changes. Now, an associated question came up to that. So when you initially deployed Zerto virtual replication, did you use the preceding feature? Because Zerto has the preceding feature where you can basically do get most of the data at the target site, and then we'll do a delta sync. Or did you just use us and do the full push?
We did the full push because the SANs were already in place. So we've always had the DR strategy. We've always been working on that process. So the components we already had in place, we initially just pushed the data raw. We did see that there was that option, but since everything was already in place, there was an opportunity for us to try leveraging that component.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we tend to see it that way quite often. Even because of the way that we're a good citizen on the network, so we're not clobbering everything, and particularly when you're compressing the traffic, then of course you're going to see it the initial sync go a lot longer. But we do, Bernard, to answer your question online there, we do have a preceding function if you need that. In fact, if you're going with like some of our cloud providers, or if you just got terabytes of data, maybe you'll want to dump it to like a NAS device or backup tapes even, get it to the target site, and then you can map to it, and then we'll just do a delta sync. So that way if you don't have the size pipe that Greg's working with, our minimum is 5 meg, and we actually see in practical use it lower, but of course we're going to say a minimum of 5. So hopefully that answers those questions, and it's really good insight, Greg. So I want to get your insight on this next thing coming up here. So now I'm going to go into a discussion on the architecture of Zerto to give everybody a better idea of, how we're put together and why it is that we're simple to use, and yet we have a lot of capability. And we're going to start that off, of course, with a Forrester survey, because we need to know who's having problems and why. And as we look at this, the one thing that struck me, probably in your industry, employee productivity, of course, is important if there isn't, an outage. But I was going on down a little bit there to loss of customer confidence. And so would you say in your industry, Greg, that that may be your number one, having 24-hour banking and all that going on?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that a financial institution has network outages, I mean, everybody wants to be able to have access to their money. So, it's not a good thing. We try to get, when we're doing maintenance windows and things like that, we always make sure that we're at a minimum downtime for those, and we keep that. We're pretty good with that. But at anybody, I mean, you have server failures and things like that happen. And if you're down for any length of period of time, people start to wonder, boy, is that why am I keeping my finances there if they can't keep their system running? And so that for us, that was a huge thing to consider too when we're looking at for disaster recovery and trying to maintain our systems. And we don't want to, we want to be able to keep them as reliable as possible. And
so that really does reflect in level of confidence at the customer level, but then, as you talked about in your section of where you're able to do the non-disruptive testing, there's a level of confidence, even if there is a disaster, that you can be back online very, very quickly. And so that's a great side effect of having a capable product like that, to where you're accomplishing, customer-facing issues, but also internally, where as an administrator, you've got more confidence.
Yeah, and to that point, we do when we were implementing the product, we were doing our own testing to make sure what was happening. But it's great for our auditors too. If they want to come and say, when was the last time you tested? I said, well, I can either do it now, or I can pull the report from when we've done the testing and what that testing is. And the nice thing that we do see with Zerto is that it does allow us to build a offline or a sandbox network if we want to do that testing with, so that we can, when we do a failover test, the system can completely come up online beyond the network, and we can at least go check the services and make sure everything's started up like we would expect it to. Granted, being that it's the same machine on the network, obviously you can't get it completely connected, but you can at least make sure that the system boots up and does what it has to be able to do. And that's something that, for my team, they have a confidence level now that, it does what it says it's going to do, and it's going to be able to do that when we're ready for it.
That's fantastic. So let's move over to, I'm going to start talking a little bit about the architecture here and the problem we're trying to solve, and the problem we feel like we have solved to a very great extent. And that is the software-defined data center. And the key components of having things at the software layer is you get rid of the dependency on hardware. So let's look at what problem Zerto's pulling into the equation. It's pushing that replication up into a software layer, as opposed to depending on hardware at the storage layer of doing replication. Because if you think about the inside your data center, and I know you were about 70%, I believe, virtualized, Greg, is that right?
That's correct.
So that's a big footprint. So even though you're not 100, you're 70%. And if you can streamline, as you said you have, and you can make simpler, and you can get things reliable for 70% of your servers, that does two things. It gives you the confidence that a great majority of your network is up very quickly in case of disaster, but it also gives you additional time to fix the things that aren't virtualized yet. And that way it gives you more time to deal with the Stone Age, is what I like to call it, of dealing with hardware and those things. And that gets you there by pushing the replication and everything, orchestration, all that up into the software layer. So Zerto virtual replication was designed from the very beginning as we wanted to be tier 1 enterprise class, world ready to deploy just as it rolled out. In 2011, we were primarily focused at enterprises. 2012, we added in capability of multi-tenancy that cloud providers love and service providers absolutely absorbed as quickly as possible. We have over 150 partners now that are cloud service providers. And what we did was we solved a problem. We give you the agnostic from hardware capability, but we also do the orchestration, but the product was geared toward high-end. I mean, Greg, you're running SQL, you're running transactional, very important stuff and you're trusting Zerto virtual replication to protect it, correct? Correct. Yeah, so, and it's doing that for you, and you're able to fail over and test it.
Yeah, we actually virtualized a new SQL or took a physical SQL server and virtualized it, and we actually applied Zerto to it, added it to its own replication group, and actually did several failover tests with that with that software, with the hardware and software, and we haven't seen any adverse effects to it, which has been very nice because the SQL server that we virtualized was a very important one for us, and the reason why we chose to make it virtualized is because we needed to be able to have a good way to get all that data into our data center in DR. And so we chose to go ahead and virtualize the entire application and server, move it from the physical hardware to a virtual hardware, and then applied Zerto to it and did all the testing with it, and it works great. We haven't had any issues with it.
Yeah, so that's great to hear, and that should. You've been running it in production. You got quite a few servers, so to hear that you're looking at it as something that is for your most critical machines, that you're trusting virtualization and Zerto virtual replication. That's very substantial, and we see that all over the globe. So let's go into going to talk a little bit about how things are put together. So this is a very simplified architecture of simple deployment, 2 sites. And if you look at some of the details here, we've got a primary site that has a different number of hosts and different types of storage versus what's on the secondary data center on a recovery site. Because it doesn't matter to Zerto Virtual Replication what the hardware is. We deploy very simply. We have a Zerto Virtual Manager. We install virtual replication appliances, it's those VREs, on each host, and then you create VPGs that I'll talk about here in the next couple of slides. And that's a simple deployment. I pair these sites, and I'm ready to start identifying the virtual machines that I would like to protect. So building on that, you can replicate anything to anything, and that's exactly what we mean by that. So if you've got, really the only requirements are you need some sort of VMware environment underneath, and that's kind of it. You can have different hosts, you can have different hardware brands, you can have all local storage for all we care. As long as it's data store presented to the cluster, the virtual, the VMware cluster, then we're able to work with it. Highly scalable. So let's talk a bit about how we would scale. Let's say you added in another 100, 200, 500 virtual machines. You're going to scale that cluster out. And so as you scale out the cluster, you're going to add a VRA to each of the hosts in that cluster. And we scale right along with that cluster as it grows. At some point, you may need to have more clusters, and we're able to scale with you on those as well. The limits, talk a little bit about limits here. We basically recommend that we'll protect around 5,000 VMs per virtual center. And the reason why we say per virtual center is it's not a Zerto cap as far as our performance goes. It's just the interaction with virtual center that starts degrading after about 5,000 VMs per virtual center. And then you've got per VRA, we count it by volume. So it's a number of protected volumes. You do about 500 total per VRA. So as you can see, we can scale pretty substantially to meet very aggressive infrastructure needs. So the recovery point, there's no app performance impact because we're not doing anything at the production site as far as we aren't doing any snapshotting, and we're not doing any scheduled syncs. What we do are actually the VRAs replicate as it's being written to the storage. We replicate it continuously. So it's a continuous sync replication where what we're doing is it's still asynchronous, but we can get within seconds of RPO, as Greg was talking about earlier. His RPO is in seconds. So we're able to get you that because we're not depending on snapshots at the primary site, and there's no schedule, and I'm not waiting on a bunch of snapshots to go over to the recovery site. We do require 5 meg of minimum bandwidth. I do see it lower. There's a question from Rob. And I'll pick up some other questions there at the end, and we'll talk about other things, but that was relevant to the discussion here. So we're able to accomplish that. And at the recovery site, we have a little journal. Well, we have journals. And what those journals are doing is they're allowing you to do that point-in-time recovery. And you're able to accomplish a lot by this simple, simple architecture compared to a lot of other architectures. But we're continuously replicating that data. We have a journal that I can go back up to 5 days of point-in-time recoveries, which is a fantastic capability to have if I think you were talking about patching a server, Greg, and the concern was, well, if the patch goes sideways, what's going to happen?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we were debating on when our last backup was going to be to it, but with having it in the replication group, we felt comfortable enough that we would have a point in time that we could go back, a couple minutes just prior to the patch being applied and be able to get the server back up to running to its last known good state.
Yeah, so that could be seconds prior, because if you've ever looked at the, well, I don't know you have, if you've ever looked at your points in time, the checkpoints, they are very, very, very granular within seconds of.
Yeah, exactly. Based on from what I've seen, I mean, we've got them down. I think they were down to within at least between 10 to 30 seconds, based on how busy the systems are. We're getting the log shipped over pretty quickly.
Yeah. So it gives you that another level of comfort that you're able to use it in a different way. So you're using it for DR, but you're also using it for migration, but you're also using it for disaster in a patch, for a box. So you're leveraging it exactly the way that we see the maturity of people that get used to what this product does, and you start thinking about, wow, I could use it for this, and it just does it. It makes it easy for you to do that. And we talked a bit about bandwidth optimization earlier, and how you're seeing at least around a 50% savings, and that's done per VPG level. So let's talk a little bit about virtual protection groups. So virtual protection groups are the next thing you do after you've paired your site. So the typical install is this. I've got a primary recovery site. I install on the primary. I install Zerto on the recovery sites. And then I pair the sites. And then the next step is what you normally would want the next step to be, which is I'd just like to select the virtual machines that I want to protect and protect them. And that's the concept of a virtual protection group. And you can do that per application. You could do it per tier. And there was something that, Greg, we were talking about a little bit, that of a protect then plan concept of when you started working with Zerto, you found that it was important to get them protected first. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our initial concept was, we know we have all these servers that we deem critical that we want replicated to DR, obviously. And so the initial plan was to let's just get them let's just start replicating them, but we wanted to build them in a way that made sense. In my team, we actually sat down. We actually spent a couple hours go through this over a couple of days, and we actually whiteboarded out all of the servers, and based on that, we grouped them into logical groups for us. And one of the things that we did is we said, okay, what's business critical for us, meaning what's member impacting? Being a financial institution, we want to make sure that we get the systems that the members are going to be using, those systems that rely for the member that, see if I can say this again, the systems that members rely on to do their business, whether it's mobile banking or or even coming into the organization, into a branch location. We wanted to make sure that we identified those systems, and then from there we branched out, okay, what's secondary, what's tertiary, what's our fourth grouping that we're going to do. So we that's how we started modeling it, but then we started going back and thinking, well, if I build this model that way, then I'm kind of locking these in to be in a group that has to go all at once. So we started looking and said, okay, well, what if I only want to do this one server? And so we started thinking about that, and we started thinking, these would be good we can still have these like systems that are dependent upon each other. Those can still be in their VPG group, but then we can take these other systems that aren't necessarily dependent on one another. They're still critical, but we want to be able to move them separately. And so we're actually building our VPG groups on the fact that anything if they're interrelated to each other, we'll move them as a group, but if they're not, we'll go ahead and build some of those as their own entity so that they're their own replication, which gives us flexibility to move the whole group if they're part of that group, or if we need to, we have a particular server we know we need to move because it's having an issue and we want to roll it back to a point in time and make sure it's back up. We can do that with the protection groups. So we're doing it on a like system-related model as well as criticality, but also do we have to put them in a group? Can we just do them as individuals? And that's how we've been moving forward with that. But we have got to the mentality that not all of our networks per se may be in our DR, but we're trying to get the systems over there so that they are protected. So no matter what, if something happened to them today, the systems can be replicated. They'll be sitting over there. We fire them up. We move them to the appropriate networks that they're supposed to be assigned to later, or we can update the groups later to automatically do that failover, build that network out for us. As far as once the infrastructure is designed on the DR side, but we are just trying to get them over there for one of the biggest things, and that's just getting them replicated. But putting that idea behind it, how do we want to replicate them? How are they going to be grouped together? What's the interrelation between those systems? We've sat down, and it's a philosophical question that everybody has to, at some point, figure out, how do I want to do it? And
yes. Yeah, and actually, it's in some organizations it goes from philosophical to religious, because it's historically, and this is we're freeing ourselves from history. Historically, disaster recovery planning, this slide was the sort of the linchpin or the catching point that had a lot of problems organizationally, not technically. It was once we decide how we're grouping these, then we need to decide, first of all, their level of importance, which is going to translate into usually some big hardware purchase, such as replication and storage and all that. And therefore, this had to be done before you could do what you now do, which is you take more of a protect then plan stance, because nobody gets fired for VMs that need a reboot because they came up in the wrong order that are all protected in a disaster. So it's okay if I need to restart a service or something. Those virtual machines are protected. So let's talk about virtual protection groups. You take, as Greg said, you could do an application, or you could take a tier, or you could take maybe this one. We just want to get this one protected. So for whatever grouping you have, it's some affinity grouping. But if you look at the characteristics of the affinity grouping, it can be virtual machines there in blue on the host, and also it could be VMDKs spread out across multiple data stores, which are on, of course, probably multiple arrays, volumes, whatever. But they're coming from different locations, but we don't have to treat them as one big unit. We just need to pick the VMs out that we want protected, because we call that a virtual protection group, and Zerto is able to deal with that. You just pick out the VMs you want, and then you're able to get them protected and get them to the replication site. It becomes that easy. And then the orchestration, the complementing, boot order, IP address changes, all of that can come after the fact if you don't know that information ahead of time. But the first and most important thing is get them replicated, get them protected in some sort of virtual protection group. All right. Now, failover, failback, and recovery, we got a couple of animations here. So we've got some VMs that are being replicated, and now we have the recovery time is in minutes. So how is that possible? Typically, if you're doing snapshots at the source site and you have to do some sync at the recovery site, there's overhead with that. Well, with Zerto Virtual Replication, if you recall, we're doing continuous replication. We got to have a journal there at the recovery site, and so when you do a failover, it's a matter of the data's already there. If we're RPO of 15 seconds or 30 seconds or a minute or whatever, Normally it's in the seconds. That is the difference between your source and your target site. So you're able to recover that much, much faster. It's a matter of shutting down. We orchestrated all of this. You can shut down the source site and power up the target site, and you're back online within minutes. If you've done that virtual protection affinity grouping and you've got all of that worked out, you've done your testing, you've got the boot order, you got your services starting. If you need to put a script in there to make things kick off a little bit better because you got some service or something from a cranky server that won't start, you do all that ahead of time. You get all of that tested non-disruptively, and then that causes your failover event to be very minimal, and the RTO is very, very low compared especially to other solutions. You can do that click to test anytime because it is non-disruptive. You're doing this all without impacting the production replication or the production network, just as it sounds. Now, offsite cloning is the ability, if I need to go past a normal test time of, I need to maybe re-architect an application because of testing, I can use that replication, my secondary data center as my test network as well. But I want to spin up from production virtual machines my test machines, but I'm going to isolate them. That's what the offsite cloning feature does. It allows you to clone an entire virtual protection group and put it into an isolated network. Once it does the clone, it is a fully freestanding clone of the virtual machine, the source and the point in time that you want to take it from. And that way you're able to leverage Zerto virtual replication in another way that's seeding your test environment if you need to. Now, in version 3.5, which came out about a month or so ago, we added Offsite Backup. Now, the Offsite Backup is an extension of what Zerto does already, which is we've got that data replicated at the target site. What we did was we added a service on your Zerto Virtual Manager. It's called the Zerto Backup Appliance. And what it does is it does what it sounds like. It is managing the offsite backup operations, because what you can do with it is leverage those virtual protection groups you've already created, leverage the replication you've already got in place. So we're just taking the work you've already done for DR and we're extending it out up to a full year of milestone points that you want to recover to in a backup situation. You can use different types of repositories, and they can be their SMB. So anything that presents SMB can be used as a target repository for your backups. So if you have, we just released a paper, if you've got Windows 2012 servers, they have deduplication built in. They're a fine target for backup because you've probably got those servers anyway, and use them for archiving up to a year where you could just recover very quickly from a month ago or 6 months ago or whatever the increment that you need. And we make that very easy and seamless, just as we've done with the DR component. We make backup that easy. Now, inside the backup, what we've done is we've made this thing portable. So the backups that you take are packages. And so there's a package with enough metadata. It knows about the VPG, it knows about the checkpoint, it knows about the VMs in it. And then you're able to recover those virtual machines back to some period of time ago. And so there's the checkpoint times, there's the data. Sort of talked past these a little bit, but it's a portable flat file where it can be stored on SMB. Now, here's something that's interesting about these. Let's say you have a complete disaster, yet you've stored these off-site somewhere, maybe even in the cloud. A Zerto Virtual Manager who has never seen these packages can import them, and you can live again. You know, if you had a complete disaster, but you had those packages of your backups, offsite backups, stored somewhere else. So it just gives you another level of survivability. All right, so let's get into a few more of the things that Greg brought up, but I want to pull some of them out as far as just some of the functionality. So workflow automation, a lot of the things we do, not just replication, but we also orchestrate the entire workflow. And that's as important as anything, because there's products that can do replication, there's products that can do, components of it, but having everything integrated is very, very important for simplicity and for manageability. So you've got the replication, but we also have some intelligence in our workflow. So if, for example, you have an application that has an application owner that requires end-user acceptance testing before your failover operation can be considered successfully, built into the failover workflow, I can orchestrate whether I want them to roll back or commit it based off of a button they click. So if I have a hard, if you don't accept this in an hour type of agreement, then in your failover orchestration, you can have a rollback in 60 minutes if the end user does not accept this by checking a little button and saying it's okay. It will automatically roll that thing back from the recovery site to the source site. And that's just the intelligence built in to the product to make things much simpler as you can for disaster recovery. Now, the management is, of course, a vSphere plugin, but we also have a browser-based management. It gives you more landscape, and it's available on more devices, so you can take your Android device or something and manage your failover operation if you're on the road, or if you just want to show off to your friends that you can actually fail over or do migrations from your tablet. In 3.5, we announced enhanced alert handling. It gives you a lot more information about what's going on and how you can go about fixing whatever issues you may be having. And we also have, if it's something past your problem as far as just a configuration or network or something, then you can actually open a ticket with Zerto inside the GUI itself. And it's just the friendly ease of usability and things that we want to make sure are there. This, of course, comes from our acceptance in the CSP, the cloud service provider world, of needing reporting and functionality and alerting that's much more mature than you would expect from just an enterprise product. And so we work fantastically in enterprises because of, it's sort of like racing for cars, we get stress tested in very high-end environments. So the enterprise product and the cloud product has things like alert handling. So as we look at this next slide, we're seeing that this is the we don't really care slide as far as how you want to put your network together. If you have data centers spread all across the globe and you want some sort of bidirectional replication across continent, if you want to go to a cloud provider for a portion of it, if you want to go just between two data centers, it's all good for you. If you have multiple branches like Greg does, and eventually, right now it's not in the plan, but hey, if they keep growing and they have a major branch open up somewhere, you could add in multiple replication scenarios such as you see on the screen here, because we're not constraining you, because we're not constrained by hardware. Greg, you brought up reporting. It was very important for you to be able to deliver audit reports. And here's our test. We've done it. We were successful. We can do it in front of you while you're watching, or here's the detailed report that you can get that shows you exactly how everything was successful. Now, this is very quick. This is something that I think Greg and I both have touched on very, very thoroughly at this point, is just the complex and manual replication processes when you're looking at depending on hardware. You have multiple teams involved, and they have to coordinate a lot of things in order to even come up with a plan for DR. And what Zerto does is we remove all of that to where it's very simple. You're locating the VM joint protected, and then you protect them, And then you can even get away from the critical path elements, such as I need to have 10 meetings to identify what apps actually go together. You can take the stance of I want to get them protected, and then I'll plan for the rest of it. And this is the way that you can do that, because you don't have the hardware purchases in front of you. You can actually leverage your hardware more efficiently, even by using local storage is if that's all you have, or if you have older storage that you can repurpose out at the recovery site, you can do that, because you can change those target data stores anytime, and Zerto will protect those machines and follow right along with it, because we're virtual aware. We understand what's going on underneath. So wrapping up here as far as the slides go, as Zerto, we're allowing you to just grow. However you grow your environment, if you want to stay all private, fine. If you want to go public, fine. We have 150 plus cloud providers that they're running Zerto. So if Greg decided one day that, okay, I need some capability that we just don't have the equipment for people, he could just go to one of our 150 cloud service provider partners, and they could do a managed service, or they could do a colo and a running Zerto to where he still manages it. It enables you so many more options. Let's say he needed to swing to another data center. Maybe it's temporary that you use a cloud provider as like a big swing box to replicate everything over, and then go over to the next facility as you get there. Then finally, just to wrap up, I think that we've hit on that we're virtual aware, which means anything going on as far as vMotion, storage vMotion, all that stuff, Zerto sees it, and we work with it, and we're aware of it, and we are able to overcome a lot of things because we're software-based, and we are truly Tier 1, enterprise class, and we are protecting that application. So, the name of this was 99 Problems with Application Protection Isn't One. Hopefully this gives you a better idea of why we had that name. And yet we use proper English. I don't think the original song was. But we're simple and we're scalable, and you're able to get those applications protected. So let's see what questions we have here. Here's our contact information. Here's Greg's. Here's mine. And we have a few questions here, and the first one is, I'll take a few, and then we'll try to bounce off a couple, and then Ryan, of course, you can give us the wind down hook when we're supposed to. Do we work on Hyper-V? So in our roadmap, we have identified by end of year that is the next hypervisor that Zerto will be working with. There's nothing technically prohibiting Zerto from running on any hypervisor, because that's how it was designed. We happen to start with VMware as the most obvious because it's got the biggest footprint. But as other hypervisors come along, there's absolutely nothing technically stopping us from being able to support other hypervisors. Let's see what other. Let's see this question, Greg. If you fail over due to a failure on the primary site, do the deltas get cached for replication back to the recovery site? Now, I know this answer, Greg. Do you know this answer?
From what I've seen, unless I've set up the recovery, I would say that it should be, but I'll let you answer the question.
Okay, so I'm going to let's talk a bit about this as far as, remembering our architecture is we are not storing anything at the source site. We're doing replication completely and everything's at the target site. So in case of an outage or a failure at the primary site, maybe a host goes down, let's say there's just a simple network breakage, an outage. We go into what's called bitmap sync mode. So what Bitmap Sync is doing is it is tracking all the changes. So if you recall our architecture, we have a virtual replication appliance per host. And now that virtual replication appliance, the VRA, is responsible for replicating everything from VMs that are on that host. So each of those VRAs are tracking the changes that are happening on each of the VMs per host while there is an outage. Now, they have a defined memory block, and that defined memory block never grows, and we are able to track the changes per VM for whatever the duration of the outage is. We start with the block level tracking smaller, and it grows out larger for the change blocks as time progresses because of the duration of the outage. But as soon as the hosts are back up, or the primary sets back online, or the network outage has been resolved, then the bitmap sync that's been capturing all those changes will start to catch up at the recovery site. And so it may take some time because we're in effect doing a larger delta sync because it's been offline for a while. But we're still not depending on storage. It's all done in memory. The memory that was dedicated to the VRA is tracking all of that. So hopefully that answered the question. There is a comment here about that this seems to be for very large operations and a bit out of their league. Now, I want to address that because most people that started using Zerto Virtual Replication were smaller businesses because that was the ones the most desperate for a streamlined solution at the time, and so we are capable of supporting extremely large, but also graceful enough and easy enough to use. I mean, Greg, you're bringing in new people, and very quickly they're able to get ramped up and use the product. But let's say, for example, you have a very small environment of 5 servers. Use those cloud service providers because they're running Zerto. It's still your data. It's still your environment. You're just using them, and they have packages that are very attractive for someone who has 1, 2, 5 servers because, the smallest businesses, those are, if server number 3 goes out, you may be out of business, not down for a while. So the criticality of the servers aren't necessarily, they don't necessarily go right along with the size of the company. So that is where we address the entire market better, I think, than most anyone, is because you get this high-end capability, yet you're able to leverage it in different ways. We're flexible that way. So let's see. Do we have any other? You got another one here. Starting with another scalable question is for a company just starting to dive into the virtual world, starting with a couple of servers. I don't think. Are you too small for it? I don't think so. If you want to take a scale-out approach, what you find is, and I think what Greg finds is, and I think we're coming up close on time, aren't we, Ryan? So I'll try to wrap this up. Is you find you can protect more because of the ease of use, and you're able to bring people in quicker when you need to. So if you're very, very small, then use the cloud service approach that I talked about. But so Ryan, I think we're, if I'm looking at the counter, we've got like 45 seconds. So in absence of that, Greg, I certainly appreciate you spending some time with us today and talking about your environment.
Sure, not a problem. And I do put myself out there. If any of you guys have additional questions, I'm more than welcome to answer questions about how we use Zerto today as well. So.
All right, guys. Ryan with Spiceworks hopping back in. Greg, so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It's always great to get some first-hand insight as to how a product works. So we appreciate that. And Shannon, great job with the presentation. Talk about an awesome Q&A. It literally took us right up to the end of the presentation. And now I would like to announce our winner, the winner of the $150 Amazon.com gift card. So feel free to spend that all in one place. We have Bernard Marone. Bernard Marone, you are the winner, so congratulations. And just thanks to all our attendees for coming out. You are going to get a link to this recording in about an hour here, so be on the lookout for that. You'll get that in your email. It's an on-demand presentation, so you'll be able to watch it as many times as you'd like. Shannon, Greg, is there anything that you would like to close with?
Greg?
No, and just reiterate, I mean, if there's anybody that has questions, like I said, I like to share my knowledge of the tool that we use. So I've talked to a lot of different partner companies, or even competitor companies to my own organization, and how they do replication and whatnot. And they're intrigued, and it's I think it's a very good product compared to what we were looking at before.
And I would leave with any other questions. We offer plenty of free trials, and come see us at Zerto.com, and if you're interested. And you'll also see other case studies and things if they fit more toward your company's size. I think no company too small or large at this point we can accommodate. So come see us at Zerto.com. And Ryan, thank you very much, and Greg, thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Sure.
Perfect. Well, that's going to do it. And Bernard, I'll be in touch post-webinar. And you guys just got a good presentation from John, so awesome job. And that's going to end it for us.